So, continuing with the Mystery of Marie Rogêt, our narrator has just gone through all of the affidavits about St. Eustace, the gentleman that committed suicide after Marie Rogêt's body turned up, and Dupin has handed him a large file of clippings from different papers with different theories about what has gone on during this case, and we will pick up continuing to read from the clippings. On Monday, one of the bargemen connected with the revenue service saw an empty boat floating down the Seine. Sails were lying on the bottom of the boat. The bargeman towed it under the barge office. The next morning, it was taken from thence, without knowledge of any of the officers. The rudder is now at the barge office. La Diligence, Thursday, June 26th. Upon reading these various extracts, they not only seemed to me irrelevant, but I could perceive no mode in which any one of them could be brought to bear upon the matter at hand. I waited for some explanation from Dupin. "It is not my pleasant design," he said, "to dwell upon the first and second of these extras. I have copied them chiefly to show you the extreme remissness of the police, who, as far as I can understand from the prefect, have not troubled themselves in any respect with the examination of the naval officer alluded to. Yet it is mere folly to say that between the first and second disappearance of Marie there is no supposable connection. Let us admit the first elopement to have resulted in a quarrel between the lovers and the return home of the betrayed. We are now prepared to view a second elopement, if we know that an elopement has again taken place, as indicating a renewal of the betrayer's advances, rather than as the result of new proposals by a second individual. We are prepared to regard it as making up of the old amour, rather than as the commencement of a new one. The chances are 10 to 1 that he who had once eloped with Marie would once again propose an elopement, rather than that she, to whom proposals of elopement have been made by one individual, should have them made to her by another. And here let me call your attention to the fact that the time elapsing between the first ascertained and the second supposed elopement is a few months more than the general period of the cruises of our men-of-war. Had the lover been interrupted in his first villainy by the necessity of departure to sea, and had seized the first moment of his return to renew the base designs not yet altogether accomplished, or not yet altogether accomplished by him, of all these things we know nothing. You will say, however, that in the second instance there was no elopement, as imagined, certainly not. But are we prepared to say that there was not the frustrated design? Beyond St. Eustace, and perhaps Beauvais, we have no recognized, no open, no honorable suitors of Marie. Of none other is there anything said. Who, then, is the secret lover of whom the relatives, at least most of them, knew nothing, but whom Marie meets upon the morning of Sunday, and who is so deeply in her confidence that she hesitates not to remain with him until the shades of the evening descend, amid the solitary groves of the Barrière des Roues? Who is the secret lover, I ask, of whom, at least, most of the relatives know nothing? And what means this singular prophecy of Madame Rogêt on the morning of Marie's departure? I fear that I shall never see Marie again. But if we cannot imagine Marie Rogêt privy to the design of elopement, may we at least suppose that this design entertained by the girl? Upon quitting home, she gave it to be understood that she was about to visit her aunt in the Rue des Domaines, and St. Eustace was requested to call her at dark. Now, at first glance, this fact militates against my suggestion, but let us reflect that she did meet some companion and proceed with him across the river, reaching the Barrière des Roues at so late an hour as 3 o'clock in the afternoon is known, but in consenting so to accompany this individual, for whatever purpose, to her mother known or unknown, she must have thought of her expressed intention when leaving home, and of the surprise and suspicion aroused in the bosom of her affianced suitor. St. Eustace, when calling her at the hour appointed in the Rue des Dormes, he should find that she had not been there, and when, moreover, upon returning to the pension with this alarming intelligence, he should become aware of her continued absence from home. She must have thought of these things, I say. She must have foreseen the chagrin of St. Eustace, the suspicion of all. She could not have thought of returning to brave this suspicion, but the suspicion becomes a point of trivial importance to her, if we suppose her not intending to return. We may imagine her thinking thus: I am to meet a certain person for the purpose of elopement, or for certain other purposes known only to myself. It is necessary that there be no chance of interruption. There must be sufficient time given us to elude pursuit. I will give it to be understood that I shall visit and spend the day with my aunt in Rue des Dormes. I will tell St. Eustace not to call me until dark. In this way, my absence from home for the longest period possible, without causing suspicion or anxiety, will be accounted for, and I shall gain more time than in any other matter if I bid St. Eustace call me at dark. He will be sure not to call before, but if I wholly neglect to bid him call, my time for escape will be diminished, since it will be expected that I return the earlier, and my absence will the sooner excite anxiety. Now, if it were my design to return at all, if I had the contemplation merely to stroll with the individual in question, it would not be my policy to bid St. Eustace call, for, calling, he will be sure to ascertain that I have played him false, a fact which I might keep him forever in ignorance by leaving home without notifying him of my intention, by returning before dark, and then stating that I have been to visit my aunt in the Rue des Dormes. But as it is my design never to return, or not for some weeks, or not until certain concealments are effected, the gaining of time is the only point about which I need give myself any concern. You have observed in your notes that the most general opinion in relation to this sad affair is, and was from the first, that the girl had been the victim of a gang of blackguards. Now, the popular opinion, under certain conditions, is not to be disregarded. When arising of itself, when manifesting itself in a strictly spontaneous manner, we should look upon it as analogous with the intuition which is the idiosyncrasy of the individual man of genius. In 99 cases from the 100, I would abide by its decision, but it is important that we find no palpable traces of suggestion. The opinion must be rigorously the public's own, and the distinction is often exceedingly difficult to perceive and maintain. In the present instance, it appears to me that this public opinion in respect to a gang has been superinduced by the collateral event, which is detailed by the third of my extracts. All Paris is excited by the discovery of the corpse of Marie, a girl young and beautiful and notorious. This corpse is found bearing the marks of violence and floating in the river, but it is now made known at the very period, or about the very period, in which it is supposed that the girl was assassinated, an outrage similar in nature to that endured by the deceased, although less in extent, was perpetuated by a gang of young ruffians upon the person of a second young female. It is wonderful that the one known atrocity should influence the popular judgment in regard of the other unknown. Is it wonderful that the one known atrocity should influence the popular judgment in regard of the other unknown? This judgment awaited direction, and the known outrage should so opportunity to afford it. Marie, too, was found in the river, and upon this very river was this known outrage committed. The connection of the two events had about it so much of the palpable, and the true wonder would have been a failure of the populace to appreciate and seize it. But in fact, the one atrocity known to be committed is, if anything, evidence that the other, committed at a time nearly coincident, was not so committed. It would have been a miracle indeed if, when a gang of ruffians were perpetrating at its given locality a most unheard of wrong, there should have been another similar gang in a similar locality in the same city, under the same circumstances, with the same means and appliances, engaged in a wrong of precisely the same aspect at precisely the same period of time. Yet, in what, if not in this marvelous train of coincidence, does the accidentally suggested opinion of the populace call upon us to believe? Before proceeding further, let us consider the supposed scene of the assassination in the thicket of the Barrière des Roues. This thicket, although dense, was in the close vicinity of a public road. Within were 3 or 4 large stones, forming a kind of seat, with a back and footstool. On the upper stone was discovered a white petticoat, on the second a silk scarf. A parasol, gloves, and a pocket handkerchief were also found. The handkerchief bore the name Marie Rogêt. Fragments of the dress were seen in the branches around. The earth was trampled, the bushes were broken, and there was every evidence of a violent struggle. Notwithstanding the acclamation with which the discovery of this thicket was received by the press, and the unanimity with which it was supposed to indicate the precise scene of the outrage, it must be admitted that there was some good reason for doubt. That was the scene. I may or may not believe that it was the scene. I may or may not believe. But there was excellent reason for doubt. Had the true scene been, as La Marchal suggested, in the neighborhood of the Rue Pavie Saint-André, the perpetrators of the crime, supposing them still resident in Paris, would naturally have been stricken with terror at the public attention thus acutely directed into the proper channel, and in certain classes of minds there would have arisen at once a sense of the necessity of some exertion to re-divert this attention, and thus the thicket of the Barrière des Roues having been already suspected, the idea of placing the articles where they were found might have been naturally entertained. There is no real evidence, although Le Soleil so supposes, that the articles discovered had been more than a few days in a thicket. Well, there is much circumstantial proof that they could not have remained there without attracting attention during the 20 days elapsing between the fatal Sunday and afternoon upon which they were found by the boys. They were all mildewed down hard, says Le Soleil, adopting the opinions of its predecessors, with the action of the rain, and stuck together from mildew. The grass had grown around and over some of them. The silk of the parasol was strong, but the threads of it were run together within. The upper part, where it had been doubled and folded, was all mildewed and rotten, and tore on being open. In respect to the grass having grown around and over some of them, it is obvious that the fact could only have been ascertained from the words, and thus from the recollections of 2 small boys, for these boys removed the articles and took them home before they had been seen by a third party. But grass will grow, especially in warm and damp weather, such as was of the period of the murder, as much as 2 or 3 inches in a single day. A parasol lying upon a newly tufted ground might, in a week, be entirely concealed from sight by the upspringing grass, and touching that mildew upon which the editor of Le Soleil so pertinaciously insists that he employs the word no less than 3 times in the brief paragraph just quoted, is he really unaware of the nature of this mildew? Is he to be told that it is one of the many classes of fungus, of which the most ordinary feature is its upspringing and decadence within 24 hours? And there we will pause.